is the economy, tax and spending. Some are out-and-out tax cutters, even at a time of record borrowing and mounting debt. They see it as the way out of the cost of living crisis, letting us keep more of our hard-earned money, helping us spend more to stimulate the economy. More growth, and both debt and borrowing will eventually begin to come down. Or so goes the theory. They also want a smaller state. Crucial. Now, others, to be fair, are more cautious on the economy, feeling that national insurance had to rise to pay for the beleaguered National Health Service and social care sectors. And they're reluctant to cap VAT, as it's a big source of government revenue. Leading that group, surprise, surprise, is the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, who says tax cutting now is the stuff of fairy tales. He says we must wait. Well, many other issues will emerge and need resolving from our schools, including sex education and the very live issue of gender identity. There'll be housing, there'll be cladding in tower blocks, there'll be rent, all sorts of stuff. And of course, there is getting Brexit done. In what looks more like a Grand National than a derby, many are already out of the stalls, while several others are actively taking soundings. I had a little chortle this morning when Tobias Ellwood, the chair of the Defence Select Committee, who's not standing, joked that he might end up being the only non-candidate left to vote, and he urges the 1922 committee to make it tougher for candidates to stand, otherwise it may just get a little bit too crowded. However, many there are, and Conservative MPs will eventually whittle it down to just two, and then Conservative Party members in the country will make that crucial choice. We hope to talk to as many of them as we can, and we've a great start today. Steve Baker, who has announced in the last 24 hours that he's backing Suella Braverman as a tax-cutting Brexiteer. He joins me. He's sitting right next to me live now. A little bit later on, Tom Hunt, who wants Kemi Badenoch, another low-tax, low-spend Tory, will be coming along. Tom Tugendhat, who I said last night was on the show today, is actually joining me tomorrow, so don't miss that. And who else may turn up? I'm yet to know. It's very exciting at the moment. Now, here's the point. Whether you're a Conservative or not, all of this really matters. Remember, the winner becomes our Prime Minister until the next general election, possibly still 2 years away. And I really do want to hear what you think, as I said right at the very beginning of this broadcast. What do you see as the central challenges for that next Prime Minister? As I'm sure the candidate will want to hear from you as well. Email us at gbnews@gbnews.uk, tweet me personally, or tweet at GBNews. You can go on Facebook or wherever you prefer. And as I indicated just a moment ago, my first guest live in the studio, I'm delighted to say, Steve Baker, Conservative Member of Parliament for Wickham. I'm going to start straight on, nothing to do with policy at all, but that real anger that the Mail's picked up and everybody else has picked up upon. You famously backed Boris in the midst of the crisis, then very quickly turned against him and said, no, enough is enough, he's got to go. Do you regret that?
Backing him or saying he had to go?
Saying he had to go, but within about a day, I think, of having made that big statement that, you know, stand by him, he's the Prime Minister, he's the leader.
Oh, well, I mean, so if I can start at the beginning, I mean, I was pleased and proud to back Boris Johnson. He saved us from a major constitutional crisis. He defeated Jeremy Corbyn, which should have been easy, but we nearly failed to do it in 2017. I mean, if we'd lost that election to Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, we would have wrecked this country, seen this country wrecked for generations. It would have been a disaster. So on all these fronts, taking us out of the EU, saving us from a constitutional crisis, defeating the hard left, Boris ought to be remembered as a hero. But what happened that week where I changed my view is I really wanted to forgive him because, you know, it's cake, it's coffee, you know, these are normal things and they're not in themselves so much of a problem. And you could imagine people working together all day falling into the trap. But I listened to him and I stood up to forgive him. And the reason I changed my mind is that when I saw him later, he wasn't really radiating repentance. And the problem is with that is what am I to say to my constituents where a man says I couldn't hug my mother at my father's funeral or my wife of 50 years died just before her 75th wedding. 75th.
I want to get onto the big policy issues because we've only got about 6
That's
or 7
the problem,
minutes.
I'm afraid.
No, you put that very clearly and I completely understand that. But you also know, because you follow your Twitter feed and you'll be hearing from people in your own constituency, they even want to write Boris Johnson in as a third option when the 22 committee have narrowed it down to 2 candidates. That's a real crisis for the Conservatives.
Do you know, I had dinner with Boris Johnson once at Jacob Rees-Mogg's house, and I saw in him a really earnest love for the people of this country and their condition. Stripped of all joking and all humour, an earnest love. And people know it's there. That's why they love him, because he loves them. So I'm really saddened that it's worked out like this, because I saw that moment that he was the right man. The problem is, once we got into the Christopher Pincher affair, ministers couldn't trust that they were going to be well briefed by Number 10, and so they avalanched out of government. At that point, it's just over. And I know people are terribly angry and upset and bitter, and I've been called all the names under the sun. But we've got to face the reality. If he wasn't going, he couldn't form a government, and you just can't go on like that. You can't stand alone. You've got to form a government, and his government just collapsed. And that's very serious. What we need is political stability. I regret he's going. It's the right decision. We need to now try and find an optimistic way forward.
What in Suella Braverman clinched it for you? Inexperienced, frankly, outside the political world, not terribly well known?
Well, in terms of experience, she does, of course, run her own department, and she's the Attorney General, so she's in the Cabinet, and she advises on the law across all government departments. But for me, I've been with Suella through hell and high water. You know, there was a moment that came where we had to decide, were we going to be the last people to stand against Theresa May's deal, or would we back it? And you know, when I wobbled under the stress and pressure, Suella didn't. I still can see in my mind's eye her sitting there, completely across all the detail, as I was, and absolutely resolute. And this country needs to be led by someone, as it has been before, someone with absolutely fierce resolve and the humility to listen to others, the authenticity, the good character and charisma, and she's got it all in spades. And I'm excited to back her.
Has she got the power to drag your party back to what it stood for in 79 and Thatcher, and genuinely lower tax, lower spending and a smaller state? Because that makes you tick.
Well, I believe in freedom, but I believe in freedom because it's the best way to make the people of this country prosperous. But we're not going to be going back to 1979 or 1980 or 1990. Can only go forward. You know, Margaret Thatcher famously said no such thing as society, but what she meant was it's intangible. Well, what does that mean? Society's relationships. It's individuals and how they relate to one another. We've got to go forward with somebody who inspires in others a warmth in relationship and professionalism and responsibility, whether it's at work or at home, in the family. And so we can't go back to Thatcherism. We can only go forward with a new commitment to the values we know which endure.
But can Suella, as Margaret Thatcher did, and I take that distinction that you're making, that we don't go back, but I was looking really for mantras and what people believed in those years. Can Suella demonstrate the power of character and influence to look the Treasury officials in the eyes and say, no, we're not doing it that way, we're doing it my way? Absolutely she can, and I see it in her day in, day out, whenever I'm with her. But in particular, I'd point to the Northern Ireland Protocol. No one should be in any doubt whatsoever that Northern Ireland Protocol bill is in good shape because of Suella. Everybody else is wobbling, backing away, being unsure. You know, Suella, I am absolutely certain, is the one that got that bill into the right place. Well, let's stick with my theme then. Can she also look Dublin in the eyes and Brussels in the eyes over that and getting Brexit done, which you bang on about a good deal as well? At that level, you've just told me she can see off the Treasury officials. Can she see off Dublin and Brussels? Well, actually, do you know what? I've been to see the Irish Embassy recently, and we need to get away from the thought of seeing them off. What we've actually got to do is get into a place where we're collaborating and we've nurtured a spirit of friendship, and actually we can get out of this cul-de-sac we're in of conflict. And so what's required is a great spirit of warmth and diplomacy. And I think that Suella, by combining the fierce resolve to say to them, make no mistake, we're going to sort out the protocol, combined with the humility to say, actually, you know, we recognise we made mistakes in the past. Let's have a fresh start, a new beginning, a trusted relationship. I think by doing that, she can deliver change. But everybody across Europe listening to this or any of the other appearances, they need to know it doesn't matter who wins this leadership contest on Brexit. The direction of this country is set. The Northern Ireland Protocol needs resolving. And I want someone to do all those things who's truly enthusiastic about the direction we're going in. I don't want someone who made the wrong strategic calls in the past, who didn't really fight for where we are. Suella made the right strategic calls. She fought for where we are. She's the right person to see it through. You work closely with her on Brexit in your own pressure group and research group as well. Is she also with you on climate change? Would you be able to persuade her that now is not the time, in the midst of a cost of living crisis, to be paying green levies and extra taxes purely on that agenda. So nice when we can afford it, but frankly, not right now. Is she on side on that as well?
Well, if people were to look at her recent Sunday Express article, I think it was a Sunday Express article, she did express some misgivings, yeah. But of course, she's right to, because we have to have energy security and affordability. All the viewers watching this will know what's happening to their energy bills. It's intolerable. And my opponents, our opponents, will say fuel poverty. Well, they better wise up, because we're going to get fuel poverty unless we get affordable energy. And I think Suella will be well aware of that.
Yeah. Final point, and a quick one. Charles Walker said yesterday, whoever wins, and we may not win the next general election, given what's happened in recent months and the state of the economy, can you reassure people who still support your party that you can win?
I believe we can win and that we will win, because we will earn the right to say we deserve to win this general election. And Suella's the best person to get us there.
Good to see you.
You too.
And thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Keep in touch, and we will talk again as this progresses. Steve Baker, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure much of what he said will stimulate further contact from you, and you can do it via email or by Twitter. You've already started when I simply announced that he and others were going to be on the programme, so thanks for that. Mike says, I think either Suella Braverman or Ben Wallace would be a good choice for PM. We don't want Jeremy Hunt, and I'm unsure about Rishi Sunak after he failed to address the cost of living issues. Robin says members need to write Boris on their ballot paper. Well, I did put that point to Steve. Bev joins the conversation. Suella Braverman has my vote in this leadership race. If Steve Baker's backing her, I know she's the right choice. We need a Brexiteer who will lead us back to a true conservatism, which has been sorely lacking in the last 2 years. Go Suella. Stephen says Rishi Sunak's responsible for millions of people being excluded from COVID support. We are entering this cost of living crisis financially and mentally drained. He must not become our Prime Minister. More the merrier. Keep it all coming in. I'm delighted now to reflect a little bit on what Steve Baker was just saying, but broader agendas as well to further set the scene for you. To be joined here live in the studio by Joe Phillips, good friend of mine, former top radio producer and spin doctor for the Liberal Democrat leader Paddy Ashdown, and also sitting next to her, Hamish McRae, who I'll be talking to separately a little bit about his optimistic outlook on the world, but I have a slight feeling he may chip in on this conversation, which we love on this programme. So do feel free. I want to start with you, Joe. As I say, I mean, you used to produce the Parkinson Show as well. You know these big charismatic figures in the world of politics. Where I started with Steve, were you shocked at what the Conservative Party did with Boris Johnson?
I'm shocked it took them such a long time.
Different point.
I mean, you know, for every single one of the people that is now throwing their hat into the ring, they need to really look at what they voted for, what they propped up and what they stood by and let happen. And, you know, as that old adage says, for evil to occur, good people have to do nothing. So they really need to look into themselves. And I think this isn't just about Boris Johnson. I mean, I cannot believe most of us knew what he was like. Like it or loathe it, we knew he was a larger-than-life figure. You know, the buffoonery and the bluster was...
But they know that out there as well. And they're still saying they want even to write in a vote for him.
Which is preposterous. This is a man who's got no credibility, a man who even now is hanging on to power. You know, he's not quite Donald Trump, but the desperation, the lack of dignity, the lack of remorse, the lack of contrition and the basic lack of human understanding that you can keep asking people to support you, but actually, in the end, the lies come back to bring you down. And what needs to happen now is calmness, stability, and I'm sure Hamish has got something to say on the stability for the world of economics and the financial markets. But we need to recalibrate this country post-Brexit, post-COVID, about where we sit in the world. And that means that actually...
Well, Hamish has just written we need to calibrate our relationship with our own country and the world, which we'll come to in just a moment.
And that means that the Conservative Party need to recalibrate themselves. I thought what Steve Baker said was interesting.
I'm going to twist your word round, because, again, it's the point I put to Steve. I think this looks like a redefinition moment for the Conservative Party. Yeah. And essentially, it is that old choice between the men in grey suits in 76, 79 or Thatcher.
Absolutely. And I think... what he said about looking to the future is absolutely right. It's interesting. There's a poll out from Conservative Home, I think, saying that Penny Mordaunt is extremely popular with the younger voters. But what is a nonsense is the 100,000 or so members of the Conservative Party who will choose the next leader once it's been whittled down to two. Are they representative of the Conservative voters that the Conservative Party needs?
Yes.
If
Who you've just dismissed as wanting to write in Boris Johnson as a name on the ballot paper.
Well, yeah, but you know, but absolutely.
Let me bring Hamish in at that point, and I want to talk about the book as well, but as it were a precursor to that point. I always introduce you as my favourite political economist, i.e. you write brilliantly about both themes, especially when they bolt together. In your view, is this a reset moment between the kind of arguments being put forward by Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch, and on the other side, our current Chancellor of the Exchequer saying tax cuts must wait, says Rishi, describing himself as the serious candidate?
I think that we need calm. I think we need to recognise the economy is the same now as it was a week ago when it looked as though possibly Boris might survive. And I think what we need is to recognise that there isn't too big a clash between saying, look, we need a bit of course correction on tax policy. Is it really a great idea to be jacking up taxes when we may be rolling over into a recession? But to say, look, the broad strategy of Rishi Sunak, which is to keep getting that deficit down, is the right one. So I think that we just need to look at the detail. What I pray for in whoever does this job is that we have competence, calmness. You know the saying, retail is detail. Well, actually, government is detail.
Yeah. But in the book, and I've said 3 times, because we exchanged views on it, and I said, I really would like to talk about it.
Yeah.
The thing that knocked me over most about it, with the exception of China and Russia, which is a gloomy set of observations that you make and wake up and be aware of it, which will be music to Tom Tugendhat's ears, because he's been banging on about China. You paint a much more optimistic picture of what that immediate and medium-term economic outlook is. If we beat ourselves up, as every economist knows, we actually damage ourselves and the economy.
Well, I think if you step back and think of, say, what the world looked like in the early 90s, people were pretty glum then. There were books being published and winning prizes for saying how terrible. Actually, the last 25 years have been pretty darn good. We've had 2 big reverses. Which are global reverses. We've had the pandemic and we've had the war in Europe. But actually, technology has gone on advancing. Lifespans have gone on growing a little bit, probably, with the pandemic.
And as you observe, the middle class is growing, disposable incomes are growing.
Absolutely. So, I think it's always very important not to focus on the individual little things individual, quite big things that are going wrong, and miss the fact that there is underneath a gradual progress towards us getting richer.
You're also clear, which in a curious way will be music to Steve Baker's ears and many other in the Conservative Party, particularly on the right, that not only does Brexit need to be done and completed, but it can be done, and the person or the group or the organisation that is most likely to get hurt more is the EU itself, not the United Kingdom.
I think that we're going to feel our way towards a calmer and better relationship with whatever the EU becomes. And the EU now is not what the EU is going to be in 10 years' time. It's going to change, just as it has. And I think actually they have some very tough times. You look at Germany. It does most of its exports to China and its energy imports from Russia. That's not a great position to be in, however good you are at creating the stuff in between.
Joe, the leader of the Labour Party has come out and said we will not attempt to rejoin Brexit. Ed Davey's I don't think he's been quite as black and white on it.
But he has moved away from
But that is the journey of travel.
And I think that's really important because I think, and I absolutely think what Hamish says, with all his expertise, is absolutely right. Europe itself is changing. Before our very eyes. We've got people wanting to join the EU for different reasons. We've got all sorts of different sort of things coming into play with Turkey and everything else. But I think whoever becomes the leader of the Conservative Party or the Prime Minister, for however long that may be, this has got to stop, this divisive debate about whether they should be a Remainer or they're a Leaver. That debate has finished.
Final point to both of you, Joe first and then Hamish. If it is the economy, stupid, as James Carville famously said, that's trickier for you, Liberal Democrats, and it's trickier for Labour than it is for the Conservatives.
Yes, it is, except the Liberal Democrats and to a certain extent Labour are very good outside of Westminster. When you look at what mayors are doing, people like Andy Burnham, people like Andy Street, Conservative obviously, but when you look at what is happening outside of London and you see how imaginative and innovative, and I think this is Hamish's point, there's entrepreneurship, there's sensible reuse of retail centres, which obviously are dying on their feet. There's a lot that can be done locally.
In a sentence, it's the economy and it can restore the Tories' fortunes?
It's the economy. Whether that restores the Tories' fortunes, I don't know. I'm the wrong person to ask. But I'm modestly hopeful that we will actually come through all of this with maybe a mini recession. I think we may even avoid that. And then a reasonable creep out in the next 2 years' time.
Great to have you both on board. Thanks, first of all, for listening closely to what Steve said. And we've asked you if you'll go and have a coffee and stretch your legs and then come back in again and continue the conversation at 1 o'clock. But for now, Joe and Hamish, thank you both very much indeed. You are indeed watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and my splendid friends. We've lots more coming up on today's programme. Boris Johnson has resigned, of course, and the leadership race has begun in earnest. We'll be crossing live to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is in Downing Street for us. But first, let's have a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking mostly dry and warm, with plenty of sunny spells, especially in the south. Let's take a look at the details. Across the southwest of England, it will remain dry throughout this afternoon, with plenty of lengthy sunny periods. Temperatures a little lower than yesterday, with highs around 25 degrees Celsius. After this morning's cloud has burnt away, it will be fine into this afternoon, with lots of sunshine for the first part of the weekend. It's a similar picture across Wales, though there may be a bit more cloud around the northern and western coasts, warm in the south. For northwest England, it will be dry with plenty of sunshine at first this afternoon. However, later clouds will thicken up, particularly over high ground, where we may see the odd spot of rain. Across northeast England, there will be some patchy cloud around at times, though there will be lengthy sunny spells also. Feeling warm with highs around 22 degrees Celsius. At first, across southern Scotland, it will be dry and fine this afternoon. Clouds will build in from the north throughout, and this could bring some light rain at times. It will be a generally cloudier afternoon across the western half of Northern Ireland, with the best of the sunshine in the east, though cloud cover will soon increase here. Remaining mostly dry this evening, though cloud will thicken in the northwest, bringing the risk of some light rain. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It's just gone 12:30. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. The race to become the new Prime Minister is gathering pace. Former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch is the latest to throw her hat into the ring. The MP for Saffron Walden says she supports lower taxes and a tight budget. It comes after Rishi Sunak announced his bid for Tory leader. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is also expected to run. Ukrainian soldiers have started a new training programme in the UK to help them win the war against Russia. British troops will train up to 10,000 Ukrainians at sites across the country. It's being run by the Ministry of Defence, which says it will give volunteer recruits the necessary skills to fight on the front line. A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with rape. Special Constable Paul Hoyle was arrested in Essex on Wednesday following an alleged attack near Newport in Shropshire. He's been suspended from the force and will appear at Kidderminster Magistrates Court later. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister has called an emergency meeting of party leaders following anti-government demonstrations in the country. Thousands of protesters stormed the president's official residence in the latest escalation of political unrest. Police fired water cannon and tear gas at demonstrators who are demanding a change in regime. At least 2 people have been gored during Pamplona's Bull Run, the first time since the event started on Wednesday. Thousands of people turn out every year to watch the spectacle, which features 8 runs that last between 3 and 5 minutes each. 4 others were taken to hospital with concussions and injuries after falling. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Alistair.
Alice, thank you very much indeed. So, runners and riders alongside Rishi Sunak, the former Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch, as you just heard in Alice's news bulletin there, has thrown her hat into the ring, becoming the latest Conservative MP to enter that race. Former Brexit Minister Steve Baker told me that he'll not be standing and has in fact announced that he will be backing the Attorney General Suella Braverman instead. Now, Boris Johnson has said that he intends to stay on in Downing Street until a successor is chosen, and the latest suggestion in most of the newspapers is that that might take until the end of September. Well, let's get more on all of this now with the man who really knows, GB News political editor Darren McCaffrey, who is there live on College Green for us, just across the road from the Palace of Westminster. Darren, what's the buzz? Runners and riders, timescale? What are you hearing?
Yeah, lots and lots of buzz, lots and lots of runners and riders, and we haven't even really in many ways started, though we have. Rishi Sunak, of course, he is on many of the front pages today. Clearly, at the moment, the favourite. He's certainly got the backing of most MPs. The former Chancellor talking about how he doesn't want to delude people, if you like, by providing them with fairy tales, some cold, hard truths he thinks, but clearly thinks that his management of the economy, the fact he was Chancellor through a pandemic, will stand him in good stead. He is at least very widely known with the public. And interestingly, he's got the backing of Mark Spencer, the former Chief Whip today, also Liam Fox, former Defence and International Trade Secretary, who essentially said that he wanted to see someone who's actually got a plan to see the spending of government controlled over time, and that he thought that Mr Sunak could restore trust, rebuild the economy and reunite the country. So Sunak is definitely out in front. Yeah, you're right in talking about Kemi Badenoch. She is had a pretty good start, it must be said, with backing of some senior MPs as well. She set out a plan in the Times newspaper today about trying to kind of unite the country, trying in many ways to get over Brexit, but also to deal with a proper plan to try and rebuild Britain's battered economy. And then you've got Tom Tugendhat, who's never served in government. He is running chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. He's popular with a certain section of the party. And then, as you talked about, Suella Braverman, the Attorney General, got the
Darren, forgive me.
Really quite interesting, isn't it?
Forgive me, I'll tell you what else is interesting. I've just heard in my ear as well, breaking news. Ben Wallace, the Secretary of State for Defence, at the bookies a front runner, has said he is not standing.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
It is fascinating, isn't it? We've got all these names, as you say, about who's going to run and who's not going to run. And there was a thought process he may well do so. He's performed pretty well in that role as Defence Secretary. Everyone thinks he's handled the Ukraine war pretty well, don't they? The big question, of course, with Ben Wallace is, as a former soldier who was then a Secretary of State for Defence, is he someone who could actually come into Number 10 and deal with a whole range of other issues like the health service, like education, like the economy just as well? So interesting, he's not going to run. It will be fascinating to find out who he is backing. And the reason I say that is because we're going to see lots more people enter. Is Sajid Javid going to run? Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, I would suggest almost certainly is going to run. Is Nadeem Zahawi going to run? He seems to have damaged himself a little bit this week, but he's got a lot of credibility within the party. Jeremy Hunt, will he potentially run? I mean, we could see up to a dozen people, I reckon, try and go. But the big question is, who are these other significant cabinet ministers going to back? Who are they going to put the support behind? Because with them, Alistair, of course, comes a whole tranche of other MPs. So when you've got a cabinet minister, for example, backing a candidate, they normally come with potentially upwards of 10 other MPs, their supporters, who will back them. And then, of course, you go through this very, it's not really complicated, but actually it's going to be quite a short process this time round, where fundamentally there will be ballots all of next week, and people will then drop out. And those MPs will then have to decide who they back until they get down to the final two, probably by the middle of the week after next, the 21st of July, before Parliament goes into recess, up to Conservative members to decide who they're going to back. And I reckon, Alice, I know the papers you were suggesting say September. I reckon it'll be done by late August. It's really interesting today, isn't it, listening even to James Cleverly, the new Education Secretary, suggesting what all MPs are suggesting is that they want this process to end as soon as possible.
All right, well, that's brilliant, Darren. Thank you very much indeed. I fear I have bad news for you. Please stay exactly where you are, because the way this story is going, we're going to need you there with your ear to the ground and on your phone as well. But for the time being, thank you very much indeed. Let me just pick up there on what Darren and I were talking about. Ben Wallace himself has now tweeted, and I quote the man himself, "After careful consideration and discussing with colleagues and family, I've taken the decision not to enter the contest for leadership of the Conservative Party. Very grateful to all our parliamentary colleagues and wider members who had pledged support. It has not been an easy choice to make, but my focus is on my current job, Secretary of State for Defence, and keeping this great country safe. I wish the very best of luck to all the candidates and hope we swiftly return to focusing on the issues that we were all elected to address." Fascinating stuff from Ben Wallace, not a candidate, but reading the riot act to some of those who are playing daft games. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. There'll be plenty more still to come this afternoon. Rishi Sunak and Kemi Badenoch have become the latest MPs to confirm that they are indeed running as Tory leader. There are, of course, many other likely contenders, including Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss, and all sorts of other people. But what are the polls saying? Let's find out next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there,
It's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome back. It is, what is it? It's 17 minutes to 1 and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News, TV and radio. From nominations to the elimination race, it's all about numbers. You'll see bookies, odds and polls, but what do they really tell us about this incredibly febrile contest? Chopping and changing literally as we speak. Well, joining me now is one of my favourite pollsters, Joe Twyman, who's the co-founder of Delta Poll. Breaking news, as we say in the trade. There was a lot of money and support behind Ben Wallace. Worked his whatsits off, keeping going on the Ukraine thing, a solid Secretary of State for Defence, called for more money, got more money. When he's out, the rest of the ground shifts.
That's right, and it demonstrates, Alistair, how complicated it is to produce any kind of meaningful polling at this stage, because it is a constantly moving feast. And Ben Wallace was a really great example of someone who was famous, if at all, for one thing, but actually not really known particularly by members of the general public, and even really not really particularly known by members of the Conservatives. Certainly not when it came to the important issues like Brexit, like the cost of living, like any other whole long list of subjects, the NHS. But he did have a good performance on Ukraine, and that was enough to get noticed. But this is a contest with three constituencies: the Conservative MPs, the Conservative Party members, and then the general public. And you need to appeal ultimately to all three if you're going to get through. And Ben Wallace has clearly decided that he might have a good backstory, but perhaps his front story isn't enough to win.
And he does mention specifically having talked to his family as well. There was talk that he might succeed Jens Stoltenberg at NATO and maybe go for one of those big international jobs. So who knows? The picture will emerge. When you talk there about those three constituencies, I want to pick up on the middle one, because we are being literally inundated with emails and tweets from traditional Tory supporters who are furious at what the parliamentary party did to Boris Johnson. Your polling showed 2 months ago, 3 months ago, that he was deeply unpopular in the country at large. But they're saying within the Conservative Party grassroots, he remains popular and they're fed up with the MPs for dumping him.
Well, that may be true in certain circles. There are around 200,000 Conservative members, although we don't know the exact number. And it's fair to say that among some of those, Boris Johnson was popular and remains popular. But the thing is, the Conservative Party membership are not one single group. They have a range of different views within that. And even if he had been overwhelmingly popular with all 200,000, the fact remains that in the public more generally, he had been increasingly unpopular. More than half of people who were current Conservative supporters believed that he doing a bad job. Overall, 6 out of 10 people, including over a third of Conservative supporters, felt that he should resign. And so if you're going to win a general election, which is ultimately what all this is about, this entire contest, how we got here, is all about who is best placed to win the next general election, then you need to win the support of the public, not just your members. And Boris Johnson had lost that. Now, of course, there's a debate and many people would be perhaps shouting at the television now, oh, but he could have regained that. Yes, he might have done. But the fact is that the Conservative MPs and particularly the Cabinet decided that actually that probably wasn't the most likely option, and so out he went.
Yeah, well, they may reflect at their leisure upon that decision. Digging a little bit into the polling away from the personalities, and I said at the very top of the programme, Joe, I wanted to talk about beliefs, policies and ideology. I personally find it fascinating that it is crystal clear that the economy, tax, spend, the old Thatcher-Heathite debate, not about Europe, but about tax and spend and the size of the state, is what most of the candidates are talking about. Rishi, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, saying, no, it's fairy tale stuff to talk about tax cuts now. Kemi, Suella and others saying, no, we've got to do it now and we've got to do it fast. Is that emerging in the polling as well, that people out there want to have a conversation about?
Yes, absolutely. The cost of living is by far the most important issue when you ask people the most important issue facing the country, or indeed them and their families. And it has been now for months. It's really the only game in town when it comes to the public. But of course, this contest, though it will be about the solutions that the candidates put forward, or at least their ideas for how to deal with this issue, it's about more than the economy, because there's always a mistake to think that these decisions are made just in economic terms. But actually, and this has been particularly important over the last few years, we've seen increasingly cultural, social, and even spiritual issues arise. And so how the public responds to the candidates in terms of their positions, not just on the economy, but on the questions around Brexit, for instance. And I don't mean Brexit just in the sense of Britain's relationship with the European Union, though, of course, the Northern Ireland Protocol is bound to come up at some stage. I mean it also in terms of remain and leave identities, because although Brexit, strictly in terms of the EU, has for many people become less important, those identities, Remainer versus Leaver, are still very important. They're very important in the general public and they're very important within the Conservative Party. So it'll be interesting to see, for instance, if someone who voted for Remain and remained a hardcore Remainer, will they stand a chance of getting through to the final two, or indeed being selected? Will someone who campaigned for Remain and then moved over to Leave, what will they be seen compared to someone who was Leave all the way? These are still very important divisions in this country, and so potentially can have a huge impact on the vote ahead.
Stuff. Joe, thank you very much indeed. Impartial and informed as always. Great to see you. Keep in touch. We'll talk again, I'm sure, as the days develop. That's Joe Twyman, who is the co-founder and director of Delta Poll. The Conservative leadership race is well underway, and we've been speaking about it on this programme so far in some depth, I hope. But it's also important that we hear from the side that whoever that next winner is will have to take on in October, as Joe just said, and as my previous guests also said, at the next general election. Well, Justin Madders is the Labour Member of Parliament for Ellesmere Port and Neston and Shadow Employment Secretary, and I'm delighted to say that he joins me now. I've got to ask you something that is also over the papers first before we get on to the meat and drink of what that election's going to be contested about. And it's an honest question. Do you understand the disquiet that some folk feel over Sir Keir being given a clean bill of health by the Durham police, but Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak being fined by the Met for what looked almost identical events?
Well, I think that Sir Keir's handled this exemplary, really, because he has said all along that he is prepared to accept whatever verdict the police come up with. He's not put them under any pressure at all. And he's very honourably said that if he is found to have been in breach of the regulations, he would, of course, resign. Now, that's turned out to be the right call because he was cleared yesterday. I don't think it's a good idea for politicians to try and second guess why different police sources have come to different conclusions. But
Sure.
I think we know that what we got here was one photograph of Keir Starmer having a bottle of beer in between work events, and up to 16 different parties in Downing Street, many of which Boris Johnson attended. Of course, he lied to Parliament about his knowledge of them. So I don't think they are comparable at all. And I think, if I'm honest, I'm really probably more baffled that Boris Johnson didn't get more fixed penalty notices than the one he actually did.
Final point on this, though. Anne Widdecombe, former Home Office Minister, not just a Tory backbencher, but a former Home Office Minister, said if the Tories weren't beating themselves up in this self-inflicted leadership contest, then somebody in government would be appealing this decision.
What? Sorry, you mean the government would appeal the decision from
Durham Police? Yeah, that's what Anne Widdecombe told me yesterday on GB News.
Well, I don't think that the government have really got the powers to do that, and I don't think they should be interfering in clear operational police decisions about whether particular offences have been committed or not. That's a terrible precedent to set, really. I absolutely can't agree with that at all.
All right. Thank you for taking both of those questions and giving me your candid answers to it, Justin. I greatly appreciate that. In terms of what the Tories are doing, as Widdecombe called it, a self-inflicted bit of self-harm in some respects, you're a very experienced leading light within the Labour Party. Does a little bit of you regret the departure of Boris Johnson, because you and many colleagues saw him as being vulnerable? Things were beginning to go your way. They are going to have, by August, September, a clean pair of hands with a fresh set of beliefs and a new start. That makes your task of persuading us to vote Labour a bit more difficult.
Well, of course, every new leader will have a honeymoon period. It may be a very short one, given the challenges this country faces. But, let's be clear. No one on our side, and certainly large amounts of the public, had any confidence or trust in Boris Johnson as Prime Minister anymore. So it's absolutely right that he's gone. I think we should also remind ourselves, though, that the majority of people who have put themselves forward for his job have served under him for a number of years and have really supported the lies and the deceit, and also the terrible way the economy has been going over the last couple of years. So they're all tainted by association, frankly. And I think after 12 years of Conservative government, 12 years of stagnation, effectively, I can see that actually a lot of people will say, this isn't a clean slate. This is the same party. It's just a different face at the top.
That takes me to where I wanted to go with my next question anyway. Do you sense, therefore, the likelihood, and I was talking to Steve Baker and others about it earlier on, that this Tory leadership debate is about the economy, levels of taxation, spending, even the size of the state, is a debate that you in the Labour Party, post-Corbyn and under Starmer, now also want to have?
Well, I think the concern I've got about the way the Tory leadership contest will pan out is that, and we're seeing it already, there are a number of candidates positioning themselves as the heir to Thatcher, the small state, and sort of low taxation on big earners. And frankly, I think we saw under Thatcher where that got us, and it wasn't a great place. And anyone who's tried to access a public service at the moment, getting their passports done, trying to get a hold of a GP, waiting for hospital appointments, will know actually the state is on its knees, and the idea that it can be reduced further is really going to put us in an absolutely awful position. So the difficulty is, of course, that a lot of Tory members like to hear those things, and I'm concerned that we will get someone elected by them who will take us in that direction, which I think would be a disaster for this country.
Justin, as I say, a leading figure, hold a very important job as Shadow Employment Secretary. You want to hear Sir Keir, when he begins that series of big speeches, I think starting on perhaps Monday or Tuesday, spell out with crystal clarity to the British people that you as the Labour Party do embrace the notion of a big state that tries to help all sorts of folk across a whole spectrum of challenges and level the rates of tax appropriate to pay for it.
Well, the the issue of taxation is clearly something that I have to defer to my colleagues in the Shadow Treasury team on, and they'll be setting out nearer the election exactly what we'll be proposing to do on that. But I think if there is going to be a clear divide between ourselves and the Conservatives at the next election, it may well be that actually we believe in the power of the state to deliver good for people, and the Conservatives want to reduce the power of the state. And actually, if you look at the challenges we've got in terms of the cost of living, in terms of security at work, in terms of actually making sure people live healthy lives, there are lots of things that the state can be doing a lot more on than they are at the moment.
And that's a great... Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I do think it's the debate that everybody, whether they are a natural Labour supporter or Tory supporter, actually wants to have. Final point to you, and you will look at the numbers as honestly and candidly as anybody does. I still find it extraordinary that despite everything that's happened over the last 12 months, you are still just about as a party in the largest single-party territory, but you still have a way to go to be able to be confident of forming an overall majority government. Does that worry you, shock you, surprise you, or do you not just believe it?
Well, look, we've travelled a long way in a couple of years, but if you look at the polls that have come out this morning and yesterday, the Tory vote has gone into freefall and ours has gone up. So we're sort of in double-digit leads now in virtually every poll, which is where I would like us to be. And it may be that this week, with the removal of Boris Johnson and the clearing of Keir Starmer, we've reached one of those tipping points you get in politics from time to time, where the sort of general consensus shifts. It's too early to tell, but we may look back on this in a couple of years' time and say, well, this is the week that actually the direction of British politics changed.
Justin, I think you're absolutely spot on, and thanks for finding time to talk to us here on GB News this Saturday afternoon. Justin Matters there, Labour MP for Ellesmere, Portland, Neston and Shadow Employment Secretary. You are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've lots more to come up on the programme this afternoon. I'll be joined by another Conservative MP who's been open about who he's backing. Plus, how much does buying supermarket own branded food save us? All of that and more to come in the next hour.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome back. It is 1.5 minutes past 1. Welcome if you've just joined us. Thank you so much if you've been with us since 12 o'clock. I am Alastair Stewart and we are into the final hour of our programme. I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with plenty more still to come. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has resigned, as you may just have heard, and the Conservative leadership race has well and truly begun, with twists and turns like Ben Wallace announcing in the last half hour that he's not running. So who will actually turn out to be the next Tory leader? And what does it mean and why does it matter? First, let's bring you right up to date with all of today's news. Here's Alice Porter.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 1. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. The Defence Secretary has ruled himself out of the Conservative Party leadership race. Posting on Twitter, Ben Wallace said it wasn't an easy choice, but his focus is his current job and keeping the country safe. Those who have entered the contest include former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who says she supports lower taxes and a tight budget. Rishi Sunak has also announced his bid for Tory leader. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is also expected to run. Conservative MP Steve Baker says the party needs to find stability.
I know people are terribly angry and upset and bitter, and I've been called all the names under the sun. But we've got to face the reality. If he wasn't going, he couldn't form a government, and you just can't go on like that. You can't stand alone. You've got to form a government, and his government just collapsed. And that's very serious. What we need is political stability. I regret he's going. It's the right decision. We need to now try and find an optimistic way forward.
Defence Select Committee member Mark Francois told GB News he has a clear vision of what he expects from a new leader.
If we want companies from around the globe to invest in Britain, which we do, increasing the rate of corporation tax that they would have to pay is a disincentive rather than an incentive. So, personally, I'd like to see whoever wins give a commitment to reducing corporation tax rather than increasing it.
A new training programme for Ukrainian soldiers has started in the UK. British troops will train up to 10,000 Ukrainians at sites across the country. It's being run by the Ministry of Defence, which says it will give volunteer recruits the necessary skills to fight Russian forces on the front line. A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with rape. Special Constable Paul Hoyle was arrested in Essex on Wednesday following an alleged attack near Newport in Shropshire. He's been suspended from the force and will appear at Kidderminster Magistrates Court later today. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister has called an emergency meeting of party leaders following anti-government demonstrations in the country. Thousands of protesters stormed the president's official residence in the capital in the latest escalation of political unrest. Police fired water cannon and tear gas at demonstrators who are demanding a change in regime as the country sees its worst economic crisis in more than 70 years. The man accused of assassinating former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is being transferred to the prosecutor's office. The country's longest-serving leader was shot during an election campaign while he was giving a speech. Police, who are still trying to establish a motive, have admitted there was a lapse in security. A motorcade carrying his body has now arrived at his Tokyo home. Elon Musk has pulled out of his £36 billion deal to buy Twitter. The Tesla CEO claims there were multiple breaches of the agreement by the social media company. The billionaire announced he was buying Twitter in April, but he says he's now backing out because it failed to provide enough information on the number of spam and fake accounts. At least 2 people were gored during Pamplona's third bull run. The injuries are the first of that nature since the event started on Wednesday. Thousands of people turn out every year to watch the spectacle, with the weekend particularly crowded. 4 others were taken to hospital with concussions and injuries after falling. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Alice, thank you very much indeed. We've been chatting today about the Tory leadership race with both sides, Conservatives and Labour, I'm delighted to say, and hopefully throw other people who are throwing their hat into the ring or people who've said, no, my hat is staying exactly where it is, including the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace. So far, Rishi Sunak, Kemi Badenoch, Tom Tugendhat and Suella Braverman have confirmed that they will be running. Other likely candidates include Jeremy Hunt, Sajid Javid and Penny Mordaunt, plus many more besides. Now, it's all about who's backing whom. Ben Wallace has, as I say, announced that he will not be running, so it'll be intriguing to see where his supporters may decide to go. We heard earlier from Steve Baker, who's been open that he will be backing Suella Braverman mainly on the tax agenda and getting Brexit done. Charles Walker confirmed on GBNews this morning that he'll be backing Penny Mordaunt. And later on in this programme with me, you'll hear from Tom Hunt, MP, who is backing the former Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch. So let's get back to that discussion now. Joe Phillips and Hamish McRae are with me, and I'm delighted to be joined by a good friend of mine as well, who's been on the programme several times, Darius Nassimi. First, quick one with you two, if I may. Just a candid, quick take on what Baker said. I mean, it is the economy, as we were chatting before, and getting Brexit done and trusting his candidate because she's stuck with it even when the going got rough.
Well, I would disagree with him on who he's backing, but then I'm not going to be taking part in the vote.
No, but not with why he is backing.
No, but I think getting Brexit done, as we said before, we need to have a better relationship with Europe. We've burnt so many bridges with Boris Johnson's cavalier attitude to the Northern Ireland Protocol, to his attitude to Europe. We need to rebuild a relationship. That doesn't mean going back in to the single market, but it does mean restoring trust and integrity.
But he was specific, and you picked up on that point at the end of our first conversation, that Braverman is the person who can do that, take no nonsense over the Northern Ireland Protocol, go in there and tell them what we want.
I think that we need a settlement there. Quite how we do it, quite how hard we play this one, is not clear. But I think that a reset would be a very good idea. But I think that Europe needs to be aware that actually the whole of all the people of Northern Ireland need to be brought in here, yes. And you should have actually Dublin and London working together. Not one representing the unionists, the other representing the nationalists.
The other guest who I asked you to give ear to while you were having a coffee or whatever outside was Justin Madders, who I thought actually gave a fascinating interview on behalf of Labour Party. I think he's to be believed because he's a straight guy. They welcome that debate about the economy as well, because Keir and his team clearly are still trying to recover from the Corbyn era, and they now want to make an offer. But the Tories are going to set the tone of that debate. He says he welcomes it.
There's a genuine debate that we're in uncharted territory. We haven't had the recovery from a pandemic because we haven't had a pandemic. We haven't had inflation in double digits. It's probably going to go into it for 40 years. So we are in very, very uncharted territory. And I think fixing economic policy and saying we must cut taxes or we must put up taxes is actually not the right way of thinking about it. We've got to look at the data as it comes through and say, OK, we need to ease off a bit on getting the deficit down, or OK, we need to keep inflation clamped down and put up interest rates more. I don't think we should be ideological about it. You look at things as they develop, and then you do a common sense reaction to it, accepting that you may actually be a bit wrong and need to course correct.
And I think
pragmatism. Very final quick one, because I want to bring Darius in.
It's not about ideology. It's about listening to business. Not just big business, small business as well. And the thing that hasn't been mentioned since the resignation of Boris Johnson and the collapse of the government, levelling up. You know, he sacked Michael Gove, the Levelling Up Secretary. Levelling up is the big message that is going to make the huge difference on the economy and the cost of living to many, many people. But that seems to have been pushed out. Darius
Nassimi, we first met and chatted when you stood as a Conservative candidate and won. And found the going quite tough out there, but we're delighted to come in after the local elections and say, hey, I've won. You're not an MP yet. I understand those three letters quite sharply because I have a feeling. I want to ask you one thing first of all, because you spent a lot of time talking to folk who, first of all, you had to persuade to vote you as Conservatives, and we both know from our previous conversations that wasn't the easiest of conversations to have for all sorts of reasons. But we've been picking up today a real sense out there in some quarters within the Conservative Party on the ground that they are thoroughly fed up with what the current Conservative Parliamentary Party did to their Boris. Do you sense that?
Of course I do. And I think, of course, with all the issues that exist with Boris Johnson's government, we had positives like Brexit, like fighting, supporting Ukraine to fight against the Russian invasion, with also managing the COVID pandemic, which was a truly, global crisis. But then at the same time, I think he broke his own rules, his own lockdown rules. And that means that the public lost trust in him. His own party and cabinet lost the trust in him. So I think it's good that he resigned, because if he had stayed, then it would have further impacted the image of the Conservative Party within the British public. So I think we need to have a plan for the future. We need to move forward with a new vision for the country. We need to rebuild the trust. And also we need to find solutions to the problems that are facing the British people, whether that's the cost of living crisis, the fuel prices going up. And that's why we have the leadership race underway. Yeah. But for
you, within that leadership race, and you can tell me who you back at the moment or not, you ultimately will have a vote when they get it down to two people. You, as a member of the Conservative Party, you'll have that say. But do you go along with what Hamish, Joe and my other guests have been talking about so far, that this really is the time to have a profound debate about what your party stands for on the economy, on the level of taxation, the level of public spending, the size of the state? Although, as Hamish quite rightly points out, you've got to remain flexible. It's not absolutely set in concrete, but you've got to have that debate now.
Absolutely. I think people are waiting for the government to show the British public their promises and their commitments on the economy, on levelling up, on how we support the most vulnerable in our society. But we have to wait to hear the manifestos of all of the contestants for the leadership. And I think the leader has a lot at stake right now, because they have to rebuild the trust, and also they have to win the hearts and minds of the people who turned their back to the Conservative Party, as was evident during the local election. I mean, the election turnout was very low, first of all. And second of all, many people were using the local election as a protest vote. They abstained from voting. They didn't vote for Conservatives because of what was happening nationally with Partygate, with the flights to Rwanda, for example, which is affecting a lot of the immigrant communities.
As a local Tory councillor who pounds the beat and talks to people and tries to help them solve their very local issues, you're picking up a great vibe on it. Do you think Rishi Sunak, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, is simply wrong to say discussing tax cuts now is the stuff of fairy tales?
I think discussing tax is a very important priority for the British public. So I do believe that we should talk about the economy, we should be talking about tax. But I also think we need to find a leader with the right qualities to be able to run the country. People want a leader who's charismatic. People want a leader who can actually be honest about the promises that they're making, and also not to repeat the same mistakes that we've had in the past. So as I said, we need to move forward with a new vision for the future, for the country. We shouldn't sit down and keep thinking about, these were the mistakes that the previous leader made. We should have a frank and honest conversation. The Conservative parliamentarians should come together and create a framework that will help build the economy, and will also help reduce the problems and the issues that people are facing, on a local level. Because we need to be in a position to win the general election. We need to regain the seats that we lost in the local election in May this year. And also, we need to think about how we can remind the British people that the Conservative Party is the best party for the country.
And pick out one key thing within that we three didn't talk about earlier on. His penultimate point was, we collectively, who are interested in these matters, have got to try and restore faith in our political system.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, as you know...
You're a Liberal Democrat supporter, he's a Conservative councillor, and Hamish McRae, who is a wonderful independent observer of these matters,
exactly.
All heads agreeing.
And I wrote a book many, many years ago called Why Vote? A Guide for Those Who Can't Be Bothered. And I think the biggest problem and the reason I'm so angry about Boris Johnson and his behaviour and those who propped him up is what it's done to trust in politics, because I genuinely believe that most people go into politics, either at local level, like Darius, or at national level. They go in for the right reasons. They don't go in to feather their nests, to to see it as a step towards something else. Most people do it out of decency.
Yep. I'm not here to defend Boris Johnson anymore.
No.
But let me just throw on the table for you to comment, and Hamish come in as well. Leaders of your party, Liberal Democrats, and also Labour, are still being criticised by folk out there for, after 2016, trying again and again to delay Brexit, reverse it, even to the point where we said right at the beginning of the programme, Sir Keir felt he had to come out and say, no, let me make it quite clear now, all these years on, I won't be doing it. That damaged trust in politics as well.
Yeah, it did. And I think, it's absolutely right, and I can't remember who said it, but it was on your programme, Alistair, that we have had 6 years of total division in this country, partly because of Brexit and then because of COVID. You had the anti-vaxxers, you had the anti-lockdowns, the pro-lockdowns, etc., etc. We have got to move on, and we've got to stop saying, but you said this. That vote has happened, that boat has sailed. We now need to actually work out, we're stuck on this island, so we might as well work out how to make the most of it. Nobody can go back over it, but we have got to recalibrate our relationship.
It's one of the biggest challenges that you don't write about in the world in 2050, that people lose interest in democratic politics.
Well, I think one of the big challenges is that will democracy hang together for the next 30 years? And
China's doing great without it.
Well, exactly. On the other hand, they may be making exactly a few mistakes. There are a few mistakes in Russia, do you really want? And I think I would defend the messy British informal system in that we've stumbled through a really difficult constitutional decision. We are still stumbling through it. We have a government, we have a prime minister that the country is probably broadly rejecting. Look at the opinion polls. And we're sort of feeling our way towards another way of solving it. And I would defend our flexibility. I don't think we're doing badly with it. And it's been very, very difficult.
Well, the bit I love most in the book is that note that we used to get from headmasters occasionally saying, could do better. Yeah. So if you believe so. We've got, I think, a couple of minutes left, and thank you both so much for coming in, and thank you particularly for joining that conversation. Penny Mordaunt getting hammered at the moment for what she said about trans people and gender identity. Steve Baker nodded towards it as being one of those issues. It's not as big as the economy. It's not as big as Brexit. But we had a chat here at GBNews yesterday with some of the presenters, and we're talking about it. And that area of policy, sex education in schools, parents being able to say, I don't want my kids taught that until they're a certain age and so on. Is your party up for that debate?
We are up for that debate, but we have to ensure that we're sensitive with these issues. Different communities...
Sensitive to whom?
To the people who we are targeting as a result of these views. We need to be sensitive to the opinions of different communities. The UK is a very diverse and multicultural society. We have people from different cultural and religious backgrounds. So in the 21st century, in this modern world, we have to have opinions and policies that are suited for the 21st century. We need to...
But also respect those who feel that their traditions are threatened.
Exactly, and that's one of the main principles of the Conservative Party, which is be progressive, but at the same time retain those conservative values that make us a strong and also a patriotic party for the country.
It's not just a Conservative issue as well. I mean, it is a tricky issue of democracy. You can't, just because you are liberal, woke, progressive, whatever you want, stamp over the deeply held views of folk.
You can't, and nor should you. And, one of the whole issues of the whole trans debate, which I know we're not going to go into now, is that many, many women feel that their voice is no longer heard. And I think that one of the things that has to be recognised is that the Conservative Party under Boris Johnson have stoked the culture wars, the woke wars, the cancel culture. It's been picked up by their supporters in the Mail and the Express and the Telegraph in a little way reminiscent of many, many years ago when, some factions of the media used to refer to Harriet Harman as Harriet Harperson. It's childish, it's stupid. We need to have conversations with each other, and we need to be able to say, I'm sorry, I don't understand why you're so angry.
Or I disagree and respect
Or I
me.
disagree.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Final point to you. We talked a little bit about tipping points and Thatcher 79 and what have you. The context of this conversation and Penny's problems over trans and Labour's problems over, women can have penises, etc., it actually reminds me of the late 60s, 10 years before Thatcher, when Roy Jenkins, against the flow in the country, made all of those profound changes with David Steele for the Liberal Democrats on abortion, gay rights, all sorts of things.
Well, the big question here is, are we at some time where the pendulum is swinging back against all those things? But I think I would just say, remember, Penny Mordaunt was here. We're sitting, on the sofa just a few weeks ago, and I remember your listeners came in with lots of things saying they were really impressed by her straightforwardness.
Yes.
So I think this is a case for let's be straightforward and common sense rather than ideological.
Refreshing to see a young man like this raising the flag, whatever party for, in politics.
Absolutely.
Darius, it's always good to see you. Third time, fourth time? Any time. You're very welcome. And Hamish and Joe as well. I really enjoyed it, and I hope, much more importantly, that folk at home did as well and learnt a little from it. No overbeating of the drum, but just intelligent conversation.
Thank you
all very much indeed. Thank you. And it's 22 minutes past 1, and we've still got another 40-odd minutes worth here on Alastair Stewart and Friends after the break. Today is the women's singles finals, in Wimbledon. And as you may have seen earlier on, our reporter Ellie Costello is live ahead of the match. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking mostly dry and warm, with plenty of sunny spells, especially in the south. Let's take a look at the details. Across the southwest of England, it will remain dry throughout this afternoon, with plenty of lengthy sunny periods. Temperatures a little lower than yesterday, with highs around 25 degrees Celsius. After this morning's cloud has burnt away, it will be fine into this afternoon, with lots of sunshine for the first part of the weekend. It's a similar picture across Wales, though there may be a bit more cloud around the northern and western coasts, warm in the south. For northwest England, it will be dry with plenty of sunshine at first this afternoon. However, later clouds will thicken up, particularly over high ground, where we may see the odd spot of rain. Across northeast England, there will be some patchy cloud around at times, though there will be lengthy sunny spells also. Feeling warm with highs around 22 degrees Celsius. At first, across southern Scotland, it will be dry and fine this afternoon. Clouds will build in from the north throughout, and this could bring some light rain at times. It will be a generally cloudier afternoon across the western half of Northern Ireland, with the best of the sunshine in the east, though cloud cover will soon increase here. Remaining mostly dry this evening, though cloud will thicken in the northwest, bringing the risk of some light rain. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GBNews, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It is, what is it? It's 26 and a half minutes past 1, and you are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. Tennis fans are gearing up for the ladies' singles final at Wimbledon later on this afternoon. The Tunisian Ons Jabeur and Elena, oh gosh, here we go, Rybakina. I'm sorry, I'm not a tennis fan. I do apologise profusely, but what I do know is that she's from Kazakhstan, will be competing in the first major final of their careers. A lot at stake, therefore, and our reporter Ellie Costello is in the famous queue at Wimbledon right now, and she knows how to say the names properly and knows exactly what's going on. So with much relief, Ellie, I hand over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, Alistair. And the sun is beating down in SW19. It's going to be really hot today, 32 degrees, but that is not deterring the tennis fans who have come from all over the world. They have descended on Wimbledon Common, some of them queuing as early as 5 or 6 o'clock this morning. I spoke to them about what they were most looking forward to on ladies' singles finals day.
Just after 6 actually, and it's going really well actually. It's been very peaceful. We just sat down, been able to read the news and everything, so it's been a very nice start to the morning.
And what's the plan when we get inside? Are we Pimm's girls? Are we strawberry and cream girls? What are we looking to do? Food and drink wise. Let's start there first.
That's a very important question, isn't it? I think it'll be a bit of everything. I think we're looking forward to sit on Murray Mount and take in the atmosphere and just see where the afternoon takes us, really. Really excited to see the women's final. So that will be a really interesting match to watch.
Any idea of who you think might win?
I have no idea. I was hoping to see Tatiana Maria, but she...
but we don't really know the players, but I think it will be good to soak up the...
First time that Wimbledon, and it is the first time that Wimbledon has been back to full capacity since 2019. You can hear the excitement in people's voices there, and you can see people queuing behind me now. They're heading into the big match today, starting at 2 p.m. It is between Ons Jabeur and Elena Rybakina. That's the match that's happening at 2 p.m. and it's going to be historic, Alistair, whatever happens, because Ons is Tunisian. She's the first African and Arab woman to get to a Grand Slam final, and Elena Rybakina, who is she's representing the Kazakhstan flag this afternoon. She's the first Kazakh to reach a Grand Slam final. So whatever happens this afternoon, history is going to be made on centre court.
Oh, I love that. But isn't she actually a Russian?
Yes, Alistair, there has been some controversy over this. Now, the All England Lawn Tennis Club, they banned Russian and Belarusian players from Wimbledon this year, obviously due to the invasion of Ukraine. So those have all been banned from this year's competition. But what we're seeing is Elena is Russian-born. She was born in Moscow. She's 23 years old. She lived in Russia for 18 years. She was educated there. Her parents still live there, but at the age of 18 she swore allegiance to the Kazakhstan flag, not because of political reasons, but to secure funding. The Russian Federation would not give her funding to pursue her tennis career, so she went under the Kazakhstan flag. But what this does mean, Alistair, is that the All England Tennis Club, they banned Russian and Belarusian players to send a strong message to Putin. They didn't want him to have a Russian victor. They didn't want him to use that as propaganda back home in Russia. But the irony is, a Russian-born woman could still lift the trophy and receive a trophy from the Duchess of Cambridge on centre court today.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Ellie, if you see our mutual friend Vicky there, give her our love. She should be working today, but she won a ticket in the ballot, and so she's taken her mum to Wimbledon, which I think is my favourite story.
Oh,
of
she's
the day.
been very, very lucky. I'd like to get in there. And Alistair, just before I leave you, it is a Saturday afternoon. I wanted to have a little bit of fun, if that's okay with you. I have a little bit of trivia for you, Wimbledon by numbers, if you will. And I asked the breakfast team the same question this morning. How many balls do you think Wimbledon go through in the 14 days of play? Give it a guess.
Extraordinary, because they change new balls, they say, and they change them all over, and then they're recycled to local schools and what have you. I'm going to say 250,000, 250,000.
Oh, I thought you were going to go really low there and I was going to impress you. No, 55,000 balls.
Oh.
But I thought that was a huge amount of balls. And strawberries, you'll be fascinated to know, Alistair, obviously strawberries and cream are famous in Wimbledon. 7 tons of strawberries they get through here at Wimbledon. Absolutely extraordinary amounts, and 320,000 glasses of Pimm's. And I think in 32-degree weather, that's exactly what we should all be doing this afternoon, raising a glass of Pimm's.
Brilliant stuff. Ellie, enjoy, and thank you for that. And I was 5 times out on the tennis balls, but there we are. It's happened before, and it'll happen again. Keep in touch. I know you'll be back on GB News later on as the afternoon progresses. But for the time being, thank you very much indeed. Ellie Costello there, live at Wimbledon. And you are indeed watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've more to come still this afternoon, including the Conservative Member of Parliament, Tom Hunt, will be right here to discuss the leadership race. He's been open, and he is backing the former Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch. So I shall be asking him why. But let's bring you right up to date, first of all, with all of the news headlines. Here once again is Alice.
It's just gone 1:30. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Ukrainian soldiers have started a new training programme in the UK to help them win the war against Russia. British troops will train up to 10,000 Ukrainians at sites across the country. It's being run by the Ministry of Defence, which says it will give volunteer recruits the necessary skills to fight on the front line. A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with rape. Special Constable Paul Hoyle was arrested in Essex on Wednesday following an alleged attack near Newport in Shropshire. He's been suspended from the force and will appear at Kidderminster Magistrates Court later. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister has called an emergency meeting of party leaders following anti-government demonstrations in the country. Thousands of protesters stormed the president's official residence in the latest escalation of political unrest. Police fired water cannon and tear gas at demonstrators who are demanding a change in regime. At least 2 people have been gored during Pamplona's bull run, the first time since the event started on Wednesday. Thousands of people turn out every year to watch the spectacle, which features 8 runs that last between 3 and 5 minutes each. 4 others were taken to hospital with concussions and injuries after falling. TV, online and DAB plus radio. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Alistair will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory. twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. The time is 36 minutes past 1, or 24 minutes to 2, if you prefer. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. We've spoken today with a range of people about the Conservative leadership race after Boris Johnson resigned, or some would argue was forced to resign. There's been much speculation about the contenders. So far, Kemi Badenoch, Rishi Sunak, Tom Tugendhat and Suella Braverman have all confirmed that they will be running to be the next leader. And intriguingly, in the last hour or so, Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, has confirmed that he is not. So the race is clearly well underway, and who is backing whom? I'm delighted now to be joined by Tom Hunt. There he is, the Conservative Member of Parliament for Ipswich, and I first got to know him actually as a member of the Education Select Committee, and there he is right now. Very, very good of you to join us. Before we get on to who you're backing and why, when there'll be bags of time for that, don't worry, Tom. We've got a real theme running today as well, not only on social media, but emails that folk are sending us here at GB News, of real disquiet within the party, out in the country, about what the Prime Minister referred to, the former Prime Minister referred to, as the herd moving against him. What you guys in the parliamentary party did in the end to dump him. Do you regret that?
No, I don't regret it. I think that... I think a great many of us feel like we were loyal to a Prime Minister as much as we could be. But I just think for many of us, it just got too much. And for me, it was the incident with the former Deputy Chief Whip that, as I said in my statement, was the straw that broke the camel's back. And there used to be a phrase which is... I've actually forgotten the phrase, but with regards, I just think we needed to focus on the key issues, and all the drama and the scandals that continue to come out down to misjudgment was becoming a distraction from the key issues.
All right, made crystal clear.
I remembered a phrase. It was the barnacles, get the barnacles off the boat. That's a phrase.
I was wondering if it was going to be the straw that broke the camel's back, but we got the message, Tom, loud and clear. Let's turn then to the actual campaign, because you've given your version of why we got where we are, and I fully understand that, and I'm not going to argue about it, because it's a question of fact, and that's fine. You did come out this morning declaring for Kemi Badenoch, but you went slightly further, which I found intriguing. And you said of Kemi, she is, quote, unashamedly patriotic, brave and authentic. Bit of a sting in the tail, that, for some of the other candidates then, isn't there?
Well, I'm not necessarily. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, you know me well enough to know I don't hang around for long with my views. And as much as I did think to myself, I might try and hold my counsel and, not back a candidate for a while. And, and it's not sort of like me. And if I see a candidate that I think is really strong, and if I see a candidate that excites me, if I see a candidate that I think has a really exciting and compelling vision and can win the next election and defeat Labour, then I'm going to want to back them. And for me, Kemi ticks those boxes. So I thought, actually, I'm not going to hang around. I'm going to let Kemi know I'm going to back her. I'm going to firstly make sure she's running, which was my initial question. And then I found out she was running, but it was quite straightforward for me at that point.
Yeah. The bulk of our conversation so far this afternoon, Tom, has been about the call for a reset, as it were, in economics, to get back perhaps to traditional values on low tax, low spend, small state and the rest of it. Crystal clear that she is old school Tory on tax, spend and the state. Is she also old school on law and order, something that you personally feel very strongly about?
I remember when I first heard Kemi speak at an event. I think it was like 2014, 2015 time. I think she was an London Assembly member at the time. I'd never heard of Kemi Badenoch. I'd never seen her before. And I was at a conference and I was sort of daydreaming a bit and I was a bit bored at the conference. And then all of a sudden she popped up and, she did this wonderful speech out of nowhere, which I wasn't expecting, and which completely took on identity politics, was completely unashamed in doing so. And I remember making a comment after that speech saying, I think that's a future mayor of London, not knowing that 6 or 7 years down the line, I'd be supporting her to become Prime Minister of the country.
Yeah.
She's straight speaking, authentic, and directly deals with the issue. So there's no dilly dallying. She says it. She's fresh, she's authentic, as I say. She's not smooth. Well, I'd say she probably is smooth, but not smooth in an inauthentic way.
Yeah, not the sort of candidate who sits on an incredibly expensive and beautifully crafted video that suddenly slips out of the package and then is all there for everyone to see, like the former Chancellor of the Exchequer. That was a cheeky line, but I feel it quite strongly, so I put it to you. But here's the point I want to make off the back of that, and given what you were just saying. You said you'd never heard of her before, and she suddenly gave this compelling speech, and you thought that is a woman of the future. Do you think, Tom, you only came into Parliament in 2019, that this could be one of those contests where relative inexperience and a clean pair of hands are going to be crucial in pushing forward someone who's going to win?
Well, I think freshness is an attraction. I think the fact that she would absolutely represent a fresh start, a new start. But we're not dealing with Kemi. We're not dealing with somebody who doesn't know what she's doing. I mean, she's been a minister for a number of years. She's most recently she's been a minister of state for a number of years. She's got significant experience in government in different departments. I think the Treasury, Department for Education, and most recently the Department of Levelling Up Local Government. I sometimes forget what it's called because the name changes so often, but a very important department, of course. So I think she's got experience in government, but she represents that positivity and freshness. And I think that politics recently has become very beaten down. I think we've all become a bit beaten down and depressed by it. And I think, why can't we have somebody who represents a fresh start? She's young, but she's not too young. She's 2 years older than David Cameron was when he became leader of the Conservative Party. I'd find it fascinating to see how Keir Starmer would handle Kemi Badenoch at the dispatch box. You know what I mean? I think many of us have seen Kemi Badenoch on the dispatch box. We've seen her absolutely take apart figures of the left. And I think that there's an argument to be made that Kemi Badenoch might be Labour's worst nightmare.
Point taken. I want to try and get you on the record on one other thing as well, because it does matter to me. On the front page of the Telegraph today, and in another number of other newspapers as well, Rishi Sunak says that tax cuts are the stuff of fairy tales. It's just the wrong thing to be doing right now. That is not what I pick up in the country. That is not what your candidate is saying, and others like Suella as well. Is this, in your view, a reset moment on economic policy for your party?
Look, I'm not going to attack Rishi Sunak. I'm not going to say I want this to be a positive campaign about. I think that he's been, by and large, I think he's been a good chancellor. Particularly look at things like furlough grants. It was the right thing to do, and he responded nimbly to the challenges in front of him. And I've got a lot of time for Rishi. I just happen to think that I find Kemi particularly compelling, and in terms of values, and she's incredibly sound on the issues that I care most about. So I'm backing her for those reasons. But in terms of tax, I think there is an argument for the right types of tax cuts. And I think, yes, we've got inflation is a huge challenge, but so is growth. And clearly, as a Conservative, I think one of the best ways to spur growth is by making intelligent tax cuts. We've got to be responsible in the way we do it. We've got to do it at the right time. There's got to be the right taxes that we cut. But I think that, the comment that Rishi makes is that, he is right to an extent. We can't believe in fairy tales. But, at the heart of Kemi's pitch in the Times today was we've got to speak the truth. And I think the truth is that we have got a difficult time ahead. And I think we've got to level with the country on that. With something like inflation, once it kicks in, there's things that we can do to try and keep it in check. But to a certain extent, the government doesn't have a magic wand. Sure. And when I look to the next few months, there's steps that we can take to try and mitigate people's struggles. But there's certain things that we just can't solve. And we've got to level with people. And I think that Kemi represents that truth-telling that we need to do.
Thank you, Tom, for finding time to join that conversation with us and for being so candid. Total clarity there on the issues. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for interrupting it to talk to us on GB News. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Tom Hunt there, who is the Member of Parliament for Ipswich, member of the Education Select Committee, and is backing Kemi Badenoch. Couldn't have been clearer as to why he is doing that. Now, a lot of what he was talking about, and we've been talking about up to now, is, of course, the cost of living crisis, very much dictating the political atmosphere, but equally how you try and live within your budget and try and make ends meet. It's one of the key issues being raised in the leadership race, and quite rightly too. Here on the programme, we try and occasionally invite guests on who are in the know and can advise you and me and everybody else on where we can save a little bit of extra money. Those extra pennies. Well, this week, food shopping we're going to have a look at. Do supermarket own brand products actually make a difference? And can they really help us save money? I'm delighted to be joined finally today by Martin James, who is not only a consumer affairs expert, but also is good on the legal stuff as well. So give ear to what Martin has to say. My first question is, it's from the other side of the angle, and that is that the pressure on the retail sector is very real. Fears of recession, margins being squeezed. Are they beginning to slow down on price cuts and own brand bonus offers?
Well, that's a really good question, Alistair. We've seen some extraordinary events, actually, in the world of the supermarkets and retail in the last few weeks. It's extraordinary that a supermarket like Asda would come out, for example, and say that they're actually seeing their own customers setting £30 limits at the tills and taking things back, which is an acknowledgement that they recognise that the cost of living crisis is really biting. And in order to keep brand loyalty to their own supermarkets, they need to do something about that. But it's really telling that we saw the battle between Tesco and indeed Heinz, which has just been resolved at the moment. Not been as reported as much that there's another one going on with Tesco, with Mars, over the price of cat food, believe it or not, that's still a sticking point. Now, it's intriguing to see that these battles that usually happen behind the scenes are coming out into the open. And what's going on is it's all about price. Supermarkets need those brands to lure people in. But ultimately, those brands, if they price themselves too high, are going to price themselves out of the market. And I only need to refer to Lurpak Gate, which happened this week, and shocking signs of, like tagged up tubs of Lurpak and huge price rises. And I think what this all means, from an economic perspective, and actually a realistic one, is consumers who used to be very brand loyal, and that can include supermarkets as well as, the big branded goods, are going to make some very significant changes. Yeah. Certainly from what I'm hearing from consumers, we can expect to see that loyalty for a particular brand of ketchup, for example, is going to go out of the window as the cost of living bites. And that could mean that when this time next year, we could be living in a very different world where a lot of these brands could potentially go under as people move to cheaper supermarket brands and make a decision about whether they're ever going to go back.
But the manufacturers and the retailers will hate me saying this, but I think it's true in a whole lot of stuff that you and I might describe as commodities. And you mentioned butter there. You also mentioned at the beginning of the conversation baked beans, with a particular brand being mentioned. The fact of the matter is there's a degree of snobbery. I quite like to have Heinz baked beans on my shelf when actually XYZ's own brand is just as good.
Well, absolutely, Alistair. And I think, brand loyalty only goes so far. We're in an extraordinary set of circumstances where even, relatively middle-class families are looking at where they can start making cutbacks. I mean, it's the people I speak to are telling me we're seeing the return of the shopping list. Remember those? Yeah. People are actually making shopping lists and sticking to them. And from what I understand, from talking to people and talking to, trade bodies and also economists, what we're seeing is consumers are only willing to spend up to a certain line with goods that they've been loyal to. And once that price line is crossed, then they simply won't buy anymore. Now, before, there would have been a fluctuation and maybe they would have reverted back in a couple of months. But if this goes on for a long time, people will simply switch to the cheaper brands flat out. And I think it's also kind of quite interesting as well when you look at kind of those brands within brands. So we have like supermarket-owned brands, but then we're seeing a huge increase in the focus on the budget ranges as well.
Yeah.
So actually, we are moving to a much cheaper and bulk buying way of doing the shop.
Final point, and I find it an intriguing additional development to that. And my inbox emails more and more, I mean, perceptively more direct messages coming in from various supermarkets with whom my wife and I have a loyalty card, whoever it may be, saying, you know, when you pop down to the supermarket, get X, Y and Z, and if you are a member of our particular loyalty card, then there's even more saving there. I mean, that's to be applauded, isn't it? My question is this, is it also to be trusted?
Well, it's certainly something I was always a little bit sceptical about loyalty cards, to be honest, because they got a lot more out of it in terms of, you know, our data, our spending patterns than we did in terms of, you know, a couple of pence off things. But now those loyalty cards are actually starting to pay dividends.
Yes.
It's worthwhile noting as well, you know, if you're buying petrol, you might actually get a big chunk off your actual shop as well. So I would say to people, have a look at what you actually get for using that loyalty card. Yes, they're using your data. Yes, they're building a digital imprint of you. But actually, it might be worthwhile considering doing it now because you can get some decent cash off.
All right, Martin James, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for that wisdom and advice. You take care and have a great weekend. Thank you very much indeed. Martin James there, money and legal consumer affairs expert, always very helpful. We had breaking news earlier on the programme. The Defence Secretary has insisted that he's not running as a candidate for the leadership of the party, but he's insisted that the UK government remains totally committed to helping in the Ukrainian war effort and that won't change, whoever replaces Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Ben Wallace, who was at one stage tipped as a key contender in the upcoming leadership contest, was speaking before those events developed today as he visited a British Army training camp where thousands of Ukrainian soldiers are being taught vital military skills before returning to the front line. Our Home and Security editor Mark White was with him.
They are the familiar sounds of battle, but these Ukrainian troops are thousands of miles from the dangers of the front line. They are the first of at least 10,000 new recruits to the Ukrainian armed forces who are being trained here in the UK by the British military.
We're working on getting you some Ukrainian uniform rather than using the British one.
Checking on their progress, the UK Defence Secretary. He knows these Ukrainian troops and their countrymen and women back home are extremely grateful for the support and leadership Boris Johnson's government has provided. That level of commitment will remain, he says, whoever becomes the new British Prime Minister.
Britain is full square behind them, and you know the assistance to Ukraine we give is not just one person. You know, we're not me, not the Prime Minister. It's the whole effort. We've got the British Army up here today, up in the north of England, training Ukrainians on what it needs to do. You know, it's got people in Poland and in Estonia standing by our NATO colleagues. That's the reality. Is that, you know, actions matter in all of this. And you know, while the Prime Minister will be incredibly sad to leave this post, he has led from the front on Ukraine. But the whole of the political system is supportive of what we're doing in Ukraine. I don't expect that to finish at all.
Once the fresh mag's on, you're going to cock the weapon system again.
The UK has already provided £1.3 billion in support for Ukraine and supplied thousands of anti-tank missiles, artillery and other equipment. For the Ukrainian recruits here, even just a few weeks training with the British Army is highly valuable.
I believe we're here to share the experience and receive British experience from the soldiers, to receive proper trainings from our trainers, and just combine that and receive the best and most valuable skills. It's very important to combine our military experience with your standards, UK Army, and compare and make our soldier better.
Most of these recruits left ordinary jobs in Ukraine to defend their country. Many had never handled weapons before the conflict, but their British training officers say they can't fault their motivation and commitment.
They're very, very motivated. It's really impressive to see. So with quite high ambitions in terms of the training, expecting to have to scale back, but the level that they're at is incredible. They've met the expectations, if not more.
The battle for number 10 has barely even begun, but in the weeks ahead, all of the candidates will be keen to reassure the government in Kyiv that Britain's support in their fight against Russian aggression is unwavering, whoever gets the top job. Mark White, GB News.
And it won't be Ben Wallace. Mark White, thanks for that. I asked for your emails. We're going to make time at during tomorrow's programme for more of them, but I can't come off air without reading this one, which comes from Mike, who says, these pompous grey men in grey suits who like to be considered grandees have zero awareness of the membership's raw anger at how they have collectively inflicted a level of self-harm on the party not seen since Howe and Heseltine toppled Margaret Thatcher. That is it for today, but I'm delighted to say that we will be back tomorrow with more of your brilliant emails that you've sent in, plus tweets. We will also be joined, I'm delighted to say, by Tom Tugendhat MP, who is running to be the next Conservative Party leader. That and so much more tomorrow. Until then, have a lovely afternoon and a wonderful evening. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking mostly dry and warm, with plenty of sunny spells, especially in the south. Let's take a look at the details. Across the southwest of England, it will remain dry throughout this afternoon, with plenty of lengthy sunny periods. Temperatures a little lower than yesterday, with highs around 25 degrees Celsius. After this morning's cloud has burnt away, it will be fine into this afternoon, with lots of sunshine for the first part of the weekend. It's a similar picture across Wales, though there may be a bit more cloud around the northern and western coasts, warm in the south. For northwest England, it will be dry with plenty of sunshine at first this afternoon. However, later clouds will thicken up, particularly over high ground, where we may see the odd spot of rain. Across northeast England, there will be some patchy cloud around at times, though there will be lengthy sunny spells also. Feeling warm with highs around 22 degrees Celsius. At first, across southern Scotland, it will be dry and fine this afternoon. Clouds will build in from the north throughout, and this could bring some light rain at times. It will be a generally cloudier afternoon across the western half of Northern Ireland, with the best of the sunshine in the east, though cloud cover will soon increase here. Remaining mostly dry this evening, though cloud will thicken in the northwest, bringing the risk of some light rain. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.